Hi everyone, I'm Ashley and I'll be walking you through how to create a makefile. So if you don't remember how to make one, or if you never learned how to make a makefile, no worries, that's what this video is for. So we have 3 files that we're going to be making a makefile for. We have our header file, which is called add.h, and it's just a simple header file that has a function definition for adding 2 numbers. Then our next file is add.c, which is basically the implementation on how we will add 2 numbers in C. And last but not least, we have our main method in main.c, which has input validation checking and also has the logic for getting the answer for whatever 2 numbers the user wants to add. Cool. Now that we went over what files we're going to be using in this tutorial, we'll actually go over why we need to make a makefile in the first place. So a good example I have is the reason why you need to make a makefile is you don't want to type all of this, right? In order to actually add 2 numbers and run our program, we have to run 3 separate commands. In order to do this, we have to compile the add.c file, we have to compile the main.c file, and then last but not least, we actually have to put everything together that will create an executable that allows the user to enter 2 numbers and actually spit out the answer when you add those 2 numbers. So it takes 3 commands just to do this, just to add 10 plus 11 equals 21, right? But if we had a makefile, all we would need to do is type make, and then all those commands will be run, and it's just, you just type one word, make, versus gcc dash wall dash whatever dash blah 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 blah, which is too much to remember. So creating a makefile that does it all for you is a lot easier on us, so we don't have to remember those long commands or flags. So now that we know why we need to make a makefile, let's actually jump in and make one. Here is the skeleton of our makefile. I'm using Nano as a text editor. Feel free to use whatever text editor you would like. But makefiles, what they usually compose of is a target, followed by a semicolon, then a space, and then the names of files, which are the dependencies for that target. Now, what does target and dependency actually mean? So in our case, target is just the name of the executable file that you wish to run. So we go back to the terminal really quickly. If we look at the very first line over here, we named our executable file add.o. So what we can go ahead and do is just do exactly what we did here. Let's jump back into our makefile. So our target here, we would just call it add.o. And then we would list the dependencies, the files that we need in order to create the add.o executable, right? So let's go ahead and save this really quickly and jump back to the very first line. So if you notice, when we compile this for the very first time, in order to create add.o, we need add.c. So you can think of it this way: add.o depends on add.c in order to be created, right? So from there, we know that our dependency is add.c in this case. So we can go ahead and replace this entire long thing, sorry if it's really long, with just add.c. So again, to denote the difference between target and dependency, think of it this way. In order to create add.o, I need add.c, or whatever other source files or object files you need to create that other object file or executable file. Now, the next line is followed by a tab, not a space. There can be confusion between how things are separated in makefiles, and makefiles get really angry at you if you use spaces in places that you shouldn't. So in this next line, it starts with a tab and then everything else can have spaces. So here is where the command to generate add.o would go, which in this case, if we hop back to the terminal, would be this very long command. So we can simply just take this, I'm gonna go ahead and copy it, hop back into our Makefile, and replace this command placeholder with the actual command that runs this file. So just to reiterate, add.o is our target, and it requires add.c in order to be created. And then on the next line, there is a tab. Here, it's a tab. And then the entire command has spaces. And this is the command that will actually generate add.o, right? So now, following this same principle, we can do the same thing with main.o and our let's add executables respectively. So we can go ahead and do main.o together. So we know that the name of our next executable is main.o, and it needs main.c. It needs the main.c source file in order to be created. And then we hit enter, have a tab to actually write out the command. And because I don't want to write it from scratch, I'm going to go ahead and copy it right from the terminal, hop back into our Makefile, and go ahead and paste it in. Simple as that, right? And so I will leave it to you to figure out how you would create the next part of the Makefile for the let's add executable. You can go ahead and pause the video, try it out on your own, and if you get stuck, feel free to unpause and I can go ahead and explain it. Let's quickly go over how to actually do that. So, like I mentioned before, we know that our target is just the name of our executable file, which is let's add in our example. And if we go back to our terminal here, we know that the let's add executable relies upon add.o and main.o. So we're going to go ahead and put that in the dependency area for let's add. And then we hit enter, then a tab, and then we just copy and paste the command that we had from the terminal. So let me go ahead and get that really quickly. Copy that, hop into our Makefile again, and paste that right in. Now, let's talk about what this clean rule is. So the purpose of having a clean rule in a Makefile is so that it gets rid of any executable files, object files, or any files that you don't need anymore. So you don't have to remember the command on how to do that yourself. You can also embed that in your Makefile. And the way you do that is you have the word clean by a colon, and then you hit enter, and then again you have the tab spacing as I mentioned earlier, and then the command goes as follows. So you have rm, which stands for remove, a space, then you have the -f flag, which just specifies that you're removing files, then followed by another space, and then the file names of any executable files you want to remove or any specific file extensions. So in our case, we want to remove all object files and the let's add executable. So in regards to the object files, you can do this cool little shortcut by doing star.o, which basically just means remove all files that have the .o extension in it, and then have a space after that and write let's add, which is the name of the other executable we want to remove. Cool, so this Makefile is looking pretty good, but it has one slight issue, which I'll showcase by saving our Makefile and going back to the terminal. So if I try to run make, it will only generate the add.o object file. But that's not what we want, right? We want to generate all the object files and executables we need to actually run our program, add our two numbers, and get our result, right? So we need to change our Makefile to compile all of the files we need, right? And luckily, it's as straightforward as you might think. So let's hop back into our Makefile and figure it out. All we really need to do is add one important rule. and that is the all rule. So similar to how we had the clean rule, we also have the all rule, which will, again, it's pretty self-explanatory. It will compile all of our object files or executable files that we need, so we don't have to do anything manually ourselves. So all we have to do is specify the all rule, followed by a colon and then a space, and then the names of the object files and executable files that we want to compile. So in this case, we want to compile add.o, we want to compile main.o, and we want to compile the let's add executable file. Cool. So this should be it for our Makefile. Let's actually test this out and see what it does. So now I am back here at our terminal, and what I can do now is I can run make, and since we added the all rule, we can also just add the word all to here. So we'll be running the command make all, and what will happen is all of our object files and our executable files should be compiled, and which it is, right? So now what we can do is run our executable let's add, so / let's add, and then pick two numbers, which in this case I'm just going to choose 10 and 11, and if this worked, it should give us the correct answer, which should be 21, which it does. So our Makefile actually works. And if we look at it from a visual perspective in our Makefile tutorial folder, you can actually see the let's add executable and the .o files here. And let's actually try to see what happens when we use our clean rule. So to remove all of our object files and our executable files, what we can do is when we run the make clean command, it removes all of the object files and the let's add executable. So it was back to the way we originally had it before we compiled all of those object files and executable files. Cool. So that's it for this tutorial. Hopefully this was helpful, and hopefully you'll use this as a reference in the future when you make your own Makefiles. Thanks for watching.